You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Sandy Mines, one of the things I love about you is that you've been in the industry a long time, and you come from a footwear family. And our industry, I like to say the industry as a whole is familial, like we all feel like family, but then there are actual real families that have been a part of the industry. And so that's why I wanted you to be my partner in crime on this interview, because you have a perspective I don't have. And when we introduce our guests, this will all make sense. But Sandy, thanks for coming on and helping me with Shoe and Show.
Sure thing. I'm really excited to be with this family of footwear friends. I've known this crew for quite some time, and they're dear friends of ours. But I'm really excited to see how the family dynamics play out in this upcoming show.
Yeah, the dynamics are going to be really interesting because we have the Deerstacks family, the Muskat family, with us today, and that includes Rick Muskat, Michael Muskat, Danny Muskat, and Jake Muskat. I want to welcome you all to Shoe and Show, and we have a lot to talk about and want to get right to it. But first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, great to be here.
All right, so Rick, I'm going to start with you because you're on the FDRA board. I know you the best. We're dear friends. I know everyone really well, but I'm going to start with you. When we talked about having you guys come on this episode, there's a lot of change happening, and we've talked a lot on episodes with other executives about COVID and pandemic response and all these things, and I think that'll be a part of it. But there's changes happening at Deerstack specifically that you all wanted to share with the industry. You all are a third generation footwear company. You're well respected and loved across the industry. And so you have some news to share. We want to be the first to break it. And so, Rick, why don't you kind of lay it on us? What are the future plans at Deerstacks?
Well, being a family business at our core, we thought it was very important to begin the transition of ownership so that first and foremost, all of our team understand that we're thinking hard about the future, preparing for the future, and understanding that it is our intention and our hope and desire for the company to continue in our family, with our family, and obviously our blood family that's here, but the family of, as you said, about the industry, we feel that way about our company. And to let them know, let our customers, our retail partners know, and all of our suppliers know that we're beginning the transition of ownership so that the future will be in great hands. And I think we have a great team of third generation family members that are beginning to lead the company into the future.
That is great news. And we'll get to who those third generation family members are in just a second. But Michael, I want to pivot over to you as Rick's brother, as the son of the founder, and the legacy you all have so proudly continued on from just hearing about your dad has always blown me away. I remember Rick was on a number of years ago talking about how much of a trailblazer he was just on importing shoes and traveling to Europe and Brazil and elsewhere, looking for that next great pair of shoes for your customers. But fast forward to this moment in time, Michael, how on earth do you come to a conclusion that, you know what, as we're running this relay, now is the time to start handing that baton over? What went through that process as you took that decision on?
Well, when I first started the company with my father and my uncles over 50 years ago, it was a completely different industry than it is today. I'm not going to blame COVID. I'm just going to say just the times have changed. The personnel has changed. You say family. We used to the shoe industry. When I used to travel all over the world, I meet competitors, whatever. There's always shoe people that we would run into, and we would talk and do a lot. Those people are all gone. My contemporaries, for the most part, are gone, and the next generation is basically running the way the business goes today. And the business is being done completely different than the way it was. I mean, we were all about just putting together a line and going out and calling on customers, and the more customers you called on, the more shoes you sold. Since the COVID thing, everything has gone from brick and mortar basically to online. And that's the new world. That's the next generation, and it's time for them to do it.
That's really interesting that you say that. I've noticed the changes over the years, and you've been in setup mode for a very long time. You've embraced the change. You've empowered your family members. You've created some of the exciting changes that are happening in the market, right? So with your history and your legacy and your foundation, you've been already setting this up for many years. It seems to me that that is true, right? So you have here Jake and Danny, and I know Jeni well also, who've really led the charge on some of these changes years ago, right? And I know that Rick and you have really been really big proponents of that change and empowering those individuals in your family. So I'm excited to hear from Jake and Danny too. How has that been going? I mean, you've been part of the family, of course, for since birth, obviously, but I'm talking about the footwear family. How has that been? Have you been, has it been just automatically you were welcomed in? Did you find some challenges in that? Did you ever think I'm going to go in a different direction? I'd love to hear from you about the process.
Well, yes. First of all, I think Michael sells himself a little bit short when he says that the e-commerce and the way of business is a new world. Because when I came into the company 23 years ago, that was the charge that Michael gave me. He knew that something was coming with the internet. They had registered the domain for deerstags.com, and the job they gave me was to set that up. We didn't know what it meant, but I will say that Michael and I worked hand in hand that first year to set up a site, market it. One time we even did and I have the tape somewhere, the cassette tape. We ran and wrote a local radio ad in Texas somewhere. But it's interesting when I look back, the building blocks of that really set us up to understand where the retail market went. But yeah, there were times, I was born into a shoe family, but I was not, a shoe obsessive, and I hadn't worked elsewhere. And when my role transitioned more into what at the time was the standard way of doing things, and I started getting on the road and traveling to customers, I didn't know if that was what I wanted to do. And there were times I questioned it. And eventually, 8-10 years into my career, I think that I became beyond passionate about it. And when you're in a family and there's that opportunity to really have a big hand in it and for a transition, I think it excites you, and the rewards of that outweigh any thoughts of I might want to do something different. So that was my experience.
And I think similar to what Danny said, when you grow up in it and it's your dinner time conversation, I came right out of school and I didn't even want to take a month off. I wanted to go right to work and get started. And then, when you're a young pup in the business and just sort of you're not able to make much change and really learning about the way the industry works, you do have those doubts and question, is this the future for you? But as I learned the business and gained some respect for myself and from others for what I can contribute to the company, things start to change. You start to notice that you can have a profound effect on the company and the future of it. And, over time, it just became sort of natural that we would want to just continue the legacy that our grandfather started.
That's amazing. And Jake, tell me a little bit about your role and responsibility and where you're leading in the company.
Sure. Well, I oversee some of our largest accounts, manage those businesses. Currently, that's my primary role, but I'm also helping lead the charge in developing our direct-to-consumer business at deerstags.com. And I've taken on a role as sustainability lead. Speaking of that path that I took in the company of what I could change and what I, couldn't change in the beginning. I've always been vocal about sustainability, knowing that the effect that our industry has on the climate and the world is pretty devastating. But knowing that I couldn't really do much, it's very hard to turn around the Titanic, right? So, but in recent years, as I think I've become more of a leader in the company. I've gotten much more receptive ears, and we've recently launched an initiative to try to map out our carbon footprint. We've leaned a lot on FDRA for resources to help us do so, and developing 5, 10, 20-year plans to do our best in that regard.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure, Jake, to be walking alongside you in that process. Rick, I want to pivot back to you because there's something that Danny said that caught my attention, and it was this moment where he's trying to decide whether or not this is kind of his long-term vision for himself as it relates to work in the shoe industry. And we've watched a number of third generation folks walk away from the business, particularly in Asia, right? Some of these factory groups, it's been succession has been somewhat of a concern with our partnerships in Asia. And so was there ever a moment, kind of how does that process work when you have 3 kids in the business and you are passing that baton? Is there a moment where there is that gut check? Is this the right thing to do? Is there a different route to take? Or was there never a doubt in your mind that you wanted this to be a third generation owned business?
Well, since you asked the question of me, is there a doubt in my mind? I'll give you some insight into the way my mind worked. So first of all, we were very fortunate in a couple of regards. Number one is we have a very strong family, separate from the business. Each of us came into the company because we wanted to work with our family. Michael is the one most passionate about the product, and we could talk about that later. But the intention was to come into the family, the work the family was doing. I, like Jake and Danny, the same. I couldn't wait to graduate and came to work the following Monday. It wasn't about working in the shoe business, it was working with the family. The other thing that was very fortunate was Michael's and my father, their grandfather, laid out some really simple, fundamental rules, if you will, for a family business. And one is that by coming into the business, we all had to understand that it was not a lifetime commitment. If he wanted us to be happy and to pursue what we wanted to do, if it was within the family business, within the company, that was great. But if it wasn't, we should feel free at any point in time to follow our passion somewhere else. And over the course of all the years, several family members have chosen to go a different direction. The other thing was that the business feeds the whole family. So the business really comes first. The family is most important, but the business comes first. So he let us know that if we weren't right for the company, we might also be asked to leave. And again, over the course of it's now 58 years since my father and uncle started the business, we've had both of those situations. Our family is much larger than the group you see here, but the group you see here have, for some reason, found it to be what we want to do. So, yeah, I mean, we didn't ask our kids to come into the business, and Michael's kids have been in the business, and his son-in-law is as well. They wanted to. And so we found a way. When Danny came and asked, when he was getting ready to graduate, said he'd like to come to work for the company. We didn't have a job open. I went to Michael, said, what do we do? He wants to come. What do we do? He said, well, there's this thing called the internet. We don't know what to do. Let him do it. So that was sort of the way it's transpired for me.
So Rick, you said there's some rules. I'd love to hear more about the rules in the business, right? You might have a challenge or decision to make that's really large. And I'm sure there's, a lot of different views and opinions about big decisions on which way to bring the company or what to do when there's a problem or an employee or something like that. How do you resolve that amongst each other? Do you vote? Like what does that look like when you're really handling one of those big challenges?
So since you framed it in the context of the rule, the other rule was when we cross into the office, when we walk through the door into the office, we have to advocate for what's best and right for the company. We can argue, we could yell and scream, we could disagree, but as long as each of us is making the case for what is best for the company, that's the goal. When we walk out of the office, He's our father. We're brothers. These are our sons and daughters, nephews, or whatever. So we have had a lot of arguing. We go through a process of, and it's always a process. It doesn't necessarily go from A right to Z to the resolution. I remember one of our key team members was bringing a new assistant, and we were in an inventory planning meeting, and she said to him, "You're going to witness something, be prepared. We're going to go into this meeting, and chances are you'll see some yelling and screaming amongst the brothers." At this time, it was just our generation. She said, "You'll think they're about to kill each other. But then they'll walk out of the meeting and they'll go out to lunch and they'll be laughing about what they saw on TV last night or what the concert they just went to see." One of the things that Danny and Jake and their sister have brought in is a little bit more of a process in decision making. Danny is great at our meetings and taking some notes and making the comments and setting up the next meeting to follow the conversations that have taken place. And it's a little bit more structured than it was. Danny, I see your hands up.
Danny, yeah, I'd love to hear from Danny about the rules and how the voting goes. I'm sure he has an exact similar perspective, but I'd love to hear from Danny about what he thinks and his personal view on this.
I think Rick just touched on it, but in most of our history, it really was that process of, it was sort of like the dinner table, everyone sort of yelling and bringing their opinion. Which a couple things come to mind. One, it's very interesting as our company's grown and evolved the last few years in COVID. Some of the commentary and feedback I've gotten from people within the company with experience elsewhere is that actually we tend to be a lot more open-minded to different perspective and to our minds being changed in meetings. This is not necessarily within the leadership of the company, but the day-to-day decisions and the way we operate our business. But yeah, when your family tend to hash it out and argue it out. But during the shutdown, in a way we had to structure our meetings a little bit more because we weren't just getting together at lunch or, out in the hallway or in a conference room. We were scheduling a time on Zoom like we are now. And we put some structure in place and Rick and Jake and Jenny and I even work with some outside help, some coaching to help us structure the meetings, bring a context, bring an idea of what it is we want to accomplish. We're not super formal. We're a small family business. We don't have to, have an official board vote on any big decision. But it is a goal to have a decision-making process. And that was one of the things early on in the pandemic we realized was we didn't necessarily have a structure for that. So the arguments can happen, but at the end of the day, you have to have a mechanism for how are we going to resolve that, make a determination and move on and hold ourselves accountable to it. And we've done a good job, I think, in the last couple of years of really starting to put that in place and working at it and continuing to hone that.
Jake, do you second that notion? I saw you unmute yourself.
Yeah, no, 100%. I do. The unmute was unrelated.
Michael, let me pivot over to you because Rick mentioned your passion for product and how are you kind of the creative handoff, right? As you hand off to the next generation, that looks different than the business back end, less creative aspect or process that we just talked about. So talk to me about kind of what you're doing in the product space and how that transition is going to look like.
Well, the fact of the matter is, going back to the way it originally was, we would go all over the world and look for shoes and then, make samples and go out and sell, et cetera, et cetera. But today, being that it's more structured and all that, we have a lot more information of what is selling and, where we have to concentrate on what product we have. It was a much more, for me, a lot more fun years ago when we could create and, God knows what we would come up with or if it would sell. But today, it's a lot more disciplined. I mean, we get the numbers every week of what's sold and where it's selling. And with that information, my end of the business has become a lot more structured as opposed to just freewheeling. Wow,
that's interesting. So there's almost you're a lot less gut and a lot more data. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the data's there. We didn't have the data back then.
Right.
We didn't have the computer. We didn't have the cell phone, with all due respects. I mean, so we just went out and just try to outdo our competition.
And I mean, it is more science. There's more science available to balance some of that art. But I think watching your process, Michael, especially on some of your new development, there's a lot of feel still there. And I've seen you more excited about some upcoming projects than you have been in a while. And I think a lot of that has to do with your gut, which is very valuable to our company.
Thank you. Well, the fact of the matter is it's a completely different generation out there ruling the world, so to speak. And as I watch and I see the changes, I'm beginning now to react more to what it is that I see younger people doing. Our traditional business stays the same, but there's always a new young market out there. And unfortunately, for the past couple of years, nobody was anywhere. I mean, so right now, people are beginning to get out there again, and I'm beginning to see different, a little bit different in dress and a little bit different in mindset of what the young. I can't say I understand what the young people are doing, but again, I could see the changes.
That's what Jake, Danny, and Jenny are for, to help understand what the young people are doing.
That's exactly right.
And so it seems like this has been kind of a gradual transition, right? You don't have to have a hard deadline, but do you have a timeline of what this is going to look like over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and how you will really hand over the reins, or if you will still remain chairman forever and counsel forever? Of course, as family members, you're going to be involved in it, right? I mean, it's hard to really let go, and I understand that pretty well. So share a little.
I'll let Rick answer the final piece of this, but in terms of the gradualness of the change, certainly was exponentially accelerated by the pandemic.
Absolutely.
It had been gradual for, I guess since the first of our generation came into the business. But like everything else, the pandemic sped it up. Right. All of the trends that we were seeing before, not just in our family, but in the economy, in the market, they all seem to have fast forwarded 10 years. And I'll let Rick or Michael answer the next part about in terms of what.
So Michael and I started talking about this many years ago. And we started to talk to the kids about this. One day this will be yours. It was a very open-ended conversation. And then as we start to reach a certain age, as Michael and I start to reach a certain age, we realize that while we like to think we're in control of events, sometimes you're not. And what we wanted to make sure was that we had at least enough of a process in place that would secure the viability of the company going forward, that the next generation was brought on board, that had learned enough, done enough, proven themselves enough. So neither Michael nor I have any sights on retiring. So this is not about retiring, but it really is about a process where the future is better understood, again, like I said, for first and foremost, all of our team members, that they have some sense of security, that if something happens to either of us or both of us, or we just start to age out, that the company will continue and the company will be in good hands. Also very important that our retail partners understand that they have that confidence. And key to our success, and this is something that Michael has really been instrumental in building, is a relationship with our key suppliers. Our number one supplier has been with us since the early 1980s.
Wow.
It's been built on relationships. And it's important for them to know that that relationship, that foundation continues with the team that they know is there. So we're not retiring. We're not going away.
Right.
I think.
But I can tell you from my perspective, from my point of view, I've developed great relationships with our overseas partners, but I did that by going there.
Yeah.
3-4 times a year. And now I haven't been to a factory in 2 years. So it's a completely different way of doing business.
That's right.
When you go overseas and you go in the old days to Franca in Brazil or whatever, 80 or 100 factories, and you go factory to factory, you find one or whatever, and you can develop relationships. Today, there is none of that.
That's right.
It's really different. Going back to what you said before about us being a family business, where when we were in the office, it was business, 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 and then we would all go out to lunch and talk about what we saw on TV last night and whatever. We haven't been together in 2 years. There are no more of those lunches. So really, the dynamics of how we have to work is entirely different. And that's been dictated by what's going on in the world, not by our plans. We're just trying to adapt to the way the situation is.
And part of that is due to COVID, and part of it's not, right? And so with all the new technology and all the new innovation, you can connect with people in a variety of ways, on text, on all different ways. So I think it's really interesting. And I know that Danny wants to share a little bit about how those connections are made. But I will say that it is noted that your family does really strive to have those strong relationships with partners and family. And that's not going away, and that's embedded in who you are. So I respect that a lot. I mean, personally, that goes a long way with me. So I think you've done a really good job in instilling that with the family. So Danny, I know you want to share a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I just wanted to tack on to what Michael was saying, because I've had a somewhat similar experience in that working from home, which I still do, and the ability to connect virtually has been extraordinarily efficient, even with our product development and making our product. But in terms of our sales and our communications with all the different providers of fulfillment services and whatever it is that we do. But with that said, even in a half a career of what Rick and Michael have in 20 something years, the relationships that were built through times on the road and the selling process, really got hammered home how important it was when we were really shut down. And whether it was customers that we'd become friends with over years, that were still active customers or had moved on from the shoe industry, or just, industry friends that work for other companies, the ability to hop on a Zoom call and talk for half an hour and pick each other's brains about how we were doing things was really beneficial to us. And it is a really interesting question. What happens going forward? When you don't necessarily need to do the things you did in the past to conduct a business and to conduct it efficiently, but you can't lose that connectivity with the industry and that ability to be out and making new relationships that 10, 15, 20 years down the line will benefit us all mutually as well. So I think that'll be an interesting challenge and dynamic of the years ahead. Kind of looking forward to getting back with the industry, not just the company, but the industry, in June at the Fanny Show, the 210 Gala, because I do think that that's missed, even if I don't miss it on a day-to-day basis. You can see that it's an important thing that's gone on for a long time, and that needs to happen as we go forward.
And frankly, that's part of why we wanted to do this podcast. We feel this. There's a need to reconnect with the industry. The industry has really been pretty separated for a long time.
I like that you shared a little bit about Fanny, because I've been working really hard with all the brands and retailers that are coming to New York in a couple of weeks for Fanny. Nothing can replace that face-to-face connection, the collaboration, the debate, the networking, the creation of solutions and ideas. Nothing can replace that ever. So I'm really excited to see everybody back in person. And I know you have some new digs. And I'm sure that you guys have been leading the charge on your new showroom and all that. So I'm really excited to come down and see you guys in person there as well.
Can't wait to have you.
Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. Well, this conversation has been a joy and a privilege for us, Rick, Michael, Jake, and Danny. We say this with all sincerity. We love you. We love your family. You're such an important aspect of the industry. Rick, your involvement with FDRA for so many years has been instrumental to me as a person, as a man, but also as someone in the industry, as my mentor. And I want to thank you publicly for that. And I want to thank you for coming on this program to share a dynamic that a lot of us who are close to you can see happen on a day-to-day basis. But from an industry perspective, there's a reason, particularly your retail partners and your production partners, why they love you as much as they do. And that's because of this dynamic that we've seen play out in this episode. So the best of luck to the next many years ahead. And we'll be right there with you, cheering you on and supporting you in every way we can. So thanks again for coming on the program. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. And we rely on FDRA's support to help us there. Believe me. You know that.
Yep. I do know that. Folks, this has been another exciting episode of Shoe and Show. We are so grateful that you've listened in to this conversation. We have almost 320 episodes at this point, give or take a few. I've lost count. We encourage you to go to shoeandshow.com to learn all about or listen to all the past episodes. There's still nuggets of information in each of those conversations over the last 6 years that we think are even relevant today. And so make sure you check that out. Also rate us. We only accept, there's a special algorithm that only allows for 5 stars to come through. I don't know what it is. It's just something that we have, but we only accept 5-star ratings. So make sure you rate us and spread the word. And again, thanks for listening. Until next time, Shoe and Show is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.